everybody, and welcome back to Family Wealth with Esther, the podcast that's shaking up the family business world. I'm your host, Esther Goche, and I'm excited to be here and share another episode with you. We have an awesome guest today. Here at Family Wealth with Esther, we're all about discussing the intricacies of running a family business and what it means to try and put together the idea of multi-generational wealth, right? Connecting multiple generations and building strong families. And with us today, we have a very good friend of mine. His name is Masimba Marangwanda. He is the new business development director at Longdon Steel, a great family business that's very prominent in our economy in Zimbabwe, doing some really awesome and amazing projects across the country. For all of those who might know him or follow him on X, he's known as Nema Tomba with the Casio projects. Masimba, welcome to Family Wealth with Esther.
Hi, Esther, how are you doing?
I'm doing great and excited to have you here today. So,
I'm actually more excited to be here, know, and what's actually really exciting is the fact that you've managed to start this podcast to talk about family wealth and family issues and all the drama that comes with it. So hopefully we're going to have fun.
Thank you so much. And I know we are. First thing we'd like to know is what has your journey been like, right? Tell us about your family business journey, how you got into the business. How did you transition into the family business? Was it something you always wanted to do? Walk us through your family business journey as a second generation business.
I guess osmosis was how I got into the business. Okay. So after varsity, it's a project that I'd seen the old man doing, and he had a lot of passion into it. Mm-hmm. And it's something where, in our generation, as you grew up, everyone wanted to be a lawyer, a doctor, and very few people understood what steel was.
Yeah.
And I would spend holidays going to work, working at the office, getting to do all the menial stuff, going to sites, which I found very interesting because, building is all about creating stuff, right? And one moment it's just, there's nothing there. The next morning, you're now putting concrete, there are bricks, there's steel going up. Mm-hmm. So after university, the very next day after graduation, was day one. Mm-hmm. And day one was starting pretty much, working outside, moving on sites, learning the business, trying to understand how it works. Mm-hmm. And, it was something that in my head, I never really thought I was actually going to be engrossed in it. Mm-hmm. But the more I spent time there, the more I started to enjoy it, the more I realized that it's essentially engineering, and engineering is all about solutions, right? And you never have the same problems popping up everywhere. So it was an interesting start, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. And what has that journey been like for you? Where you started, like you're saying, you got into it by osmosis, right? You didn't grow up. I'm assuming that means you didn't grow up with the weight of feeling like, I need to get into the family business, or I'm going to take over the family business.
No.
You had natural interest to actually join the family business.
Yeah, there was that natural interest of wanting to join the family business. And also remember, you always have to prove yourself when you are being part of the family business, because you're walking in where there are so many other interested parties, and everyone is also looking at saying, okay, what value can you add to this business? So the journey was actually quite humbling, very, very tough. Obviously, the old man will be your biggest critic. He's the one who shouts at you the most. He's the one who literally pushes you the most, and rightfully so. Yeah. Right. So it was a journey that, in going through it, helped me mature really quickly in certain aspects. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I like what you said, that it was a humbling process. A lot of times there's a misconception with people that work in family businesses that you come in with an entitlement, right? Or you come in and you don't have to work hard. Mm. But what I'm actually taking from your answer is that your experience is actually the opposite. You had to come in and go to the bottom. You had to come in and work very hard.
Yeah.
And it was not necessarily that you're coming in and you're the big boss.
No.
Yeah.
No.
But you're coming in and you're actually needing to put in the work.
Yeah, you have to put in the work because remember, the business in itself is a standalone entity.
Yeah.
Okay, so it doesn't really matter that it's owned by a family. That business needs to grow and needs to thrive. And what happens is that level of entitlement is never given upon you because you you're not entitled to anything.
Yeah.
Okay, someone has built this thing from the ground up.
Yeah.
They've put blood, sweat, and tears, and you can't walk in and say, "Hey, you know what? Because of surname, bloodline,
Yeah.
this is what I'm entitled to." Yeah, and I'll tell you a funny joke. The one thing that used to irritate me the most about the old man is he would always small little things like if I would send an email, even to a client, and I'd copy him, he would reply and say, "There's so many grammatical errors," and he'd fix up my email. And there are those small little things that you think they're small, and you're like, "But why is he doing this?" But it's because he's having to. So you go through meetings where, in that meeting, you're the one who's actually being shut down, to saying you're not pulling your weight, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, and it's happening in front of everyone. So you realize that no, I'm not entitled. I need to work just, if not more, harder than everybody else.
That's so interesting and amazing and refreshing, because a lot of times as next gens, because this particular episode is dealing with next generation perspectives, right?
Exactly.
A lot of times that takes a lot of, actually, your answer to me seems like it takes a lot of self-awareness, being able to separate the way you'd feel as a child, right?
Yeah.
And the way you feel as someone growing in a business.
Yeah.
And at times, many a times actually, next gens struggle to transition with that, right? Being criticized at work, right? Being put down, being corrected, because there's I think it's at the back of your head, sort of like, well, anyway, this is ours, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's such a powerful lesson, right, on what it takes to be effective as a next gen leader in a family business.
The biggest thing, bigger than thinking that this is ours, is the relationship between first and second gen. Remember, you might be coming from the same household where you feel, okay, I'm now if the old man is going to say something when they're home, I'll be like, but mdaras make a sense. But at work, you can't do that. At work, you need to realize the office is sitting in. At work, even if you have a very strong opinion that he's wrong and I'm right, or he's not hearing me from what I'm saying, you don't say tipalpaniwan. You need to learn to take your L, keep quiet, and then go and address it the best way. But at home, it can be a different story. At a family function, make sense. But when you're at work, you need to know when to draw the line to say, okay, and there's no ndibaba ndichichi. Kubasa MD, right? And office MD has to be respected. So that is the one thing that a lot of families deal with in that context. So
interesting. So this is what do you call your dad at work?
DMT.
Okay. Because it's it seems like a really stupid question, right?
No, but it's not. Yeah.
But it's actually not, because sometimes even when you're doing an introduction, you're like, do you say this is Mr. So-and-so, or do you say this is my dad, or this is my father? And I think, asking the question it's like training your mind to separate the relationships, that when we're in a workspace, let's say you go to the bank and you're introducing someone, oh, this is my dad, or do you know what I mean? Yeah.
So I always do it. Like I always say that, Esther, no, I've set up a meeting with our MD, and when I get there, I introduce him as, this is our MD, and on the other hand, he's the one who likes to then say, "Oh, this is my son," And sometimes I'm just like, "No, it's okay. There's no need for that," But I always say, "Kuti MD, kana kuti ndosvika amukuru, nenyaya yedu yatinoda kutaura yakadai." So that professionalism is always very important. And a lot of customers sometimes would be like, "You guys have got the same surname. Who's that?" And then I'll be like, "No, that's the old man." And they're like, "Oh, okay. So you work with." So I try to keep it as professional as possible. Yeah, it's always very important.
Yeah, and I think that's a very refreshing model. Right. Many a times, I think with family businesses is challenges or conflict arise from family dynamics.
Yes, 100%.
And the convolution of work and home and work, right? That we bring home to work and work to home.
Yeah.
And then we bring in the relationships as well, the
Yeah.
lenses to say, this is my dad, and we're at home. Or this is my dad, but he's the managing director of this company that he built. I must respect the work he's put in, and I must also,
Yeah.
be trustworthy and respect the role and space that he's given me to actually work as well.
Yeah.
One of the other things, just borrowing from what you're saying, made me think about stewardship, right? I believe that family business really essentially is about stewardship. Because if you're looking at saying something is multi-generational, you're saying it's coming from this person, but I have the baton to pass it on to the next person. So ideally, the baton is not staying with me. I'm carrying it to take it to the third generation. So just from that view, how do you look at family business and from a stewardship perspective? And
Second generation, and to other peers of mine in second generation, I always say, never assume you are going to be given the baton. Never assume that it's a given that it's going to come. Always look and say to yourself, I am here to work for the business and to add value to the business, right? I know we'll probably touch on that aspect a bit later. But stewardship is important for you to understand that what has been created has to outlive you.
yeah,
Okay? I always have a saying to a lot of people, we are not the biggest beneficiaries of what we are building. The biggest beneficiaries are going to be generations later if we do it right.
yeah,
So you don't drive the Merc now.
yeah,
You don't go into first class now, no matter where we are. You need to realize that the next generation that comes and picks up and helps this thing grow, they become the biggest beneficiaries of what we have built. And there's, for me, peace knowing that if it outlives us, we've done well, even if we are not there to see it.
to see it, yeah.
So that stewardship, if we have that discipline in the stewardship now, you want the next generations, because Gen 1, when they create something, this is what they want. Even if they're not going to be there, they want to have the comfort of knowing that the entity will still exist years from now. And what they want to see is that, do we also have the same vision where we are saying, okay, we were at this point, we are now at this point, we are doing well, we are growing, but we are still realizing that this thing is bigger than us, and where we are comfortable, and let's keep it that way.
That way, yeah. Those are really, I think I'm finding this episode very refreshing. Usually next gen perspectives tend to be very entitled, and it's great to speak to someone who's coming with a very different perspective. Stay tuned, we'll be back for more. And we're back on Family Wealth with Esther. I'm so excited for this episode. We have Masimba Marangwanda with us, who is a second generation business leader in a family business. And this particular episode is actually focusing on next gen perspectives, right? The experience of actually working in a family business, and why we felt like this was an important topic to unpack or discuss is that a lot of times when you are a next gen, it comes with a lot of misconceptions from people. And I think one of the big topics for me that I'd like to just discuss with you is imposter syndrome, right? You're coming into a structure that already exists. And, one of the weird dynamics that people never understand or fail to just grasp is old workers. Workers that have been there, that have a certain way of doing things, workers that have worked with your father or your mother, and you're coming in and, people are low-key side-eyeing you, you know what I mean? And also other people who see you in that role and they downplay the value you bring because they feel that, wow, what else? Could it be your dad? It's your dad's company. And so there's a lot of, at times, minimizing the value that next gens can bring to a business. And and I think it in some ways creates a sense of imposter syndrome. And it's a very common phenomenon amongst next generation is that imposter syndrome, like, do I deserve to be here? And you know what I mean? So let's just walk through that with you.
I think one of the good things that I had when I started was the person I reported to, who mentored me into the work I was doing. From a sales and marketing person point was he was a very good guy. He was a very humble guy. He understood what I was stepping into, because you do get to see it. You feel it.
Yeah.
You feel it that, okay, fine, everyone is expecting you to be, you're going to come in. So even the reporting structure, I just didn't report directly to, I had my own boss, I had to report to him and etc. And I think that helped dealing with the imposter syndrome, because when you come in, you know very well, everyone's smiling at you, but everyone is not really happy that you're there. Even if you are to pull in the work, not everyone's going to celebrate with you,
Yeah.
right? Because that's how human nature is, kind of like that, especially in a setting where there's a family. People sometimes feel like, okay, are we really, are we working just to hand this over to this particular person? But you're actually there trying to pull your weight. You also go there and consult people and say, hey, how do I do this? I need help with that. So that is a true reality of what I also went through the journey.
Yeah.
And then you have moments where you're out there meeting clients and people are like, oh, you're the son, and then people want to talk to you a bit more, right? Because they feel like there's that connection. So it was something that, when I look at potentially the next generation, the question is, how do you help them manage?
Yeah.
Because it's not a conversation that the old man will sit down with you and be like, right, expect A, B, C, D. He also wants you to figure it out.
Yeah.
Kuti, what are you walking on to? You can't be walking on eggshells. I can't protect you all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's the perspectives of next gen is always very interesting. I often call it like the phenomena of stepping into a giant's shoes.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think the bigger the entity is, the worse the feeling is.
Yeah.
Because you feel the weight to say, well, this was built to this extent.
Right.
And you're looking at it like, oh, how much value can I add?
Can add to it, yeah.
And many a times outsiders just don't resonate or empathize rather with that, right? The feeling, it's always looking down on saying, well, you didn't have to work hard to get there.
Yeah.
But it's actually harder to think, well, how do I build from here?
Yes, 100%.
Right? Yeah. It's easy to go from 0 to 1, but now I need to go from 10 to 100, right?
Without. And I'm going to add something to that. You want to do that without offending Gen 1.
Oh, there we go.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you will come in with this, enthusiasm.
Yes.
To say, let's add value. Let's see if we can grow this thing. Let's make it better.
Yeah.
And then you don't want to do it with them looking at thinking, Urumaya,
That word,
yeah.
straight out of my father's mouth.
Exactly. 100%. Manya, afane mazwano, hamuno zamunoda, you know what I mean? You want to do it in a way that he appreciates that, okay, this is what it is. So in my early days, that was, I admit, that was who I was. Like, I always felt like, okay, we can do this quicker, we can do this better, we can, do, and you then only realize later that there's always got this leash on you, pulling you back and being like, we are not doing. Or sometimes you think you've got this fantastic idea, and then you're running with it, and the response is, "Ngadimbomira," right? Timboona, and you don't get to see it at that point.
Yeah.
So you've got the aspect you raised, that you're walking into the shoes of somebody who's built this thing from scratch.
Yeah.
Okay, and you're saying to yourself, okay, how do I make this thing better?
Yeah.
How do I make this thing different? How do I, you have that self-introspect to say to yourself, can I really lift it up to go to that, to the next level, right? And never underestimate how much you want to please them and say, yes, I'm doing a good job.
Yeah.
But they don't really say you're doing a good job.
they
They hardly say.
No.
I'm sure you also understand.
No.
They don't.
No, they
you
don't.
get to hear from other people that, no, right? But it is the reality. It's something that I've grown into. you get a point where you now understand each other, and you now understand, okay, this is how things need to be done, and this is how we get to this point, and let's not piss off the big man. No,
Yeah.
we'll get away eventually. Let's be a bit
Yeah.
patient.
Yeah.
So, but it becomes fun eventually.
One thing which I've actually picked up from what you're saying, which I think is really great, is trust. You know, when you are part of a family, trust just seems like it's a given, right? But we need to understand sometimes as next gens, is our parents have actually never worked with us, right? They know us as children.
Yes.
They don't know us as employees. They don't know us as entrepreneurs. They don't know us as business people. And many times in my walk, as I've developed as an advisor, if I speak to next gens, the most common everything that everyone says, male or female, is this. So we come in with the enthusiasm and the zeal, and then we've got we're on the training wheels, right?
Yeah.
But what I've learned now is that we forget that we also need to be trusted.
Yes.
In the business.
Yeah.
Right? We need to be trusted in terms of your capability and your ability to actually do the work. Yeah. Can you do the work? And so in your walk, from where you started and where you are now, do you feel that there's been a significant change over the years in your professional relationship? With your
man, we I don't remember. We don't even fight as much anymore. Actually, the issue of trust. It reminds me of the conversation we had at the conference you hosted, and the guest you had as a Gen 1 highlighted how he said, my son is extravagant and my son likes to do this, and Gen 2 we underestimate the basis of how trust at home is not trust at work.
Yeah, I love that.
These things are two different, very, very different.
Yeah.
Because the trust at home is what I've raised you to be. But at work, it's what you have to prove to me that you are.
Yeah.
Right? So the trust element is the most important.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't transcend to what they're seeing. It transcends to, then if I'm not there,
yes,
can I trust you not to burn the house down?
Yeah.
You get? So trust also stems from the need to communicate effectively. Gen 1s communicate in their own way.
Yep.
Very different from how we want them to communicate to us. And navigating the frustrations of that communication can also then create mistrust.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's, the sad thing is, but good that you now have this platform to talk about. A lot of companies struggle because the communication is not there and the trust is then not built.
Yep.
And then when there is a handover, you see this thing going in a totally different direction. And you wonder, and recently, end of last year, the listed company where the son was then promoted, and then the father came and said, no, he's not part of this. And you look at those things and you say, this is exactly what happens in family companies, right? Yeah. Trust is a very important thing.
Yes.
And it's something that the conversation regarding communication and trust is important amongst families within the context of the business. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. It's so important. In my personal journey, I didn't realize that I actually needed to be trusted outside of being a child.
Yes. 100%.
And it came with a lot of anger, a few tantrums along the way, right? Until I actually had an epiphany that I should not feel entitled to be trusted.
Yes, 100%.
Because in any dynamic, whether you're married, whether you're a friend, right, or a business partner, trust is earned.
It is earned.
And as next gens, we also need to get into really understanding that.
Yeah.
That we should be willing to go from the bottom all the way to the top, because in that process there's an earning of trust that's actually happening, right? And they're seeing your capabilities, they're seeing how you're dealing with failure, they're seeing you bringing in a new client, they're seeing you putting in a new initiative, right? They're seeing you developing ideas and so on and so forth. And throughout that journey, they're seeing your parents also seeing you develop as a person. And one of the biggest issues that exists in family businesses, right, in the family system and the business system, is intergenerational conflict. Like you're saying, young people, we're psychologically oriented towards the future. Older people generally are past
Yeah.
looking, right?
Yes, 100%.
And you're trying to marry the zeal of going forward and the safety of doing that which has always been done.
Yeah.
Right? The successes of the past, this way we did things is how we got here. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, true.
And so founders can feel frustrated by us knocking their old school ways, but it got them there.
It got them there.
Right?
Yeah, it did.
And they're looking at us with wet ears and saying, well, you've got great ideas, but where are you? Nowhere.
Oh, who are you?
And who are you?
Yeah.
And it's marrying the two, right? Getting the two generations, the two perspectives to come together and ultimately build not just a business, but the family. Because the trust, I feel that it translates both ways.
It does.
When you begin to trust someone in that space, you also trust them in another space.
Yeah, it's true.
And like what you just said, that the trust and communication, just linking those two things, I think make for stronger family systems and stronger business systems.
And for me, one of the decisions that helped me with this aspect was our business having a very independent board of directors. And I think family business should never underestimate that. And I remember that at a certain stage in the business when I was fully involved, our chairman called me over to the office. And it was a conversation regarding how are you working with the old man? How's it going? You know, and it's something where he understood the two of us, and he was now speaking to me to say, understand this is how we think, understand this is how we communicate, understand that we need you to prove that you can be trustworthy. And it was a very eye-opening conversation. And I always believe that having people like that to step in and help the family, because remember, these people are here to help the family.
Yeah, that's true.
We should never underestimate how having independent board members and independent chairmen there to guide the family structure is very important. So it was a conversation that happened many years ago, but until today, I can tell it's how it shaped who I was and how I interacted in the business as well.
Yeah, that's so great. We'll be right back. And we actually want to unpack more about family businesses and how we can actually utilize independent boards and having proper governance, corporate governance structures in place to assist us with business continuity. And we're back. We left it, Masimba, you were saying something really very interesting about the board and the value you've seen in having an independent board in your business, right? What I like is actually the intelligence or the awareness of your chairman to understand navigating the dynamic between father and son.
Yeah.
How helpful and valuable has that been to your business, just outside of for you as a being molded, but in terms of even the business itself, its growth and trajectory?
I can never emphasize the importance of an independent board of directors for any business, and especially family businesses. When you walk into a boardroom, you don't walk in as the shareholders. You walk in as employees who are going to report to people whose time is spent to help build what you've got. The amount of wisdom of their foresight and what they see from the outside looking in is always very different from, because sometimes we are inside and so emotionally invested in something that we tend to not see certain things.
That's true.
And when they come and sit us down, they give us so many aspects that are very important. And why I always respect them is the fact that they're very strict. They're very harsh, and they come and they tell it to you as it is.
Yeah.
Right, because you need to hear. And a lot of family businesses I look at have boards and have a lot of boards that are conflicted boards. Right, independent boards are always very, very important, and even for us, there's wisdom that comes in our directors, be it legal, be since they're CAs, some are engineers. They come in and look at the business and then show us what we need to do.
Yeah.
And there are many a times you walk in knowing very well we're going to get a beating in there.
Yeah.
Like you're psyching yourselves up, which shows the level of respect that we give them.
Yeah.
Because it's their time that they're giving up onto
that's
us
true.
to help us. So I believe that family businesses need to have independent boards. This thing called an executive chairman, I'm sorry, I do not subscribe to an executive chairman.
Yeah.
Because who then is going to, pretty much be able to speak to guide and say, but look, chairman, the decision you're making doesn't work. He's executive chairman. He does whatever he wants. And as families, we always want to do things that benefits the family.
Yeah.
So yes, you've got your nice family business. It's doing very well. You decide I want to buy a house for $300,000, right? It might not be in the interest of the business to do it, but you're so emotionally invested in it that that's what you're going to go and do, right? Which eventually becomes a bad decision for the business. I know someone who had a nice business. Business was doing very well. It's a totally different industry. And he made some money and he had a choice between building a workshop for his business or buying a house. And he went and he bought a house and still had the business renting. And later on struggled with it. And when I was having a conversation with him, I was like, it would have made sense to build for the business and to be on its own space. And then give yourself a benefit or a housing allowance, as compared to then buying a house for $400,000 whilst your business is still renting on the other side. It's those things where people are so emotionally invested in the business. So independent boards, I cannot stress enough the importance of having people who tell you the truth, tell it to you how it is, because you become the biggest beneficiary of that truth.
Of that value.
Yeah.
That's so true. And our last episode, which I'm sure you've listened to, we're looking at governance and we're looking more at family governance. And I like that here we're touching on the corporate governance, right?
100%.
And when you start having both structures in place, you're looking at the governance within the family, how you communicate, how you make decisions within the family, having a constitution, having family meetings, and you're marrying that to independent business advisors or independent board directors, right? They can actually help you with your strategy and have a responsibility to the company because they've actually agreed to sit on your board and they've agreed to sit on your paperwork legally. And so they've got that responsibility to protect themselves and the business as well. And I think when you have both governance systems in place in the family and in the business, you're probably 80% towards continuity, right? And I think that's such a great perspective and a fresh perspective because it actually wasn't part of my questions. But thank you very much for bringing in and sharing the value that having that board has brought to your business.
100%.
And I'm sure even to your development as a business leader, right? Having someone outside of your father critiquing you and pushing you.
100%. And whatever, even if it's a soundboard or just saying, and we do it a lot. Even after the board meeting, we're going to spend the next 2-3 hours having a conversation and passing ideas after everything is done, the formalities. And I always look forward to those moments because I always leave knowing very well that, there's so much that's been impacted and that independence is very, very important. Yeah. It's very, very important.
So something this has sprung up from this conversation. So I like fresh questions.
Right, good.
The current environment in the country, in Zimbabwe, especially, has been very tough. and there's been a lot of business closures.
Yeah.
And because I'm a champion for family businesses, I always look at how many of these businesses are family businesses, especially in the retail sector.
Yeah.
We have a ton of family businesses, if not maybe 80% of them are actually family owned.
Yes.
Maybe people don't realize that.
Yeah.
And you've got these families that have contributed so much to the economy. They're employing hundreds of people across the country, right?
Yeah.
You've got retail chains that are going from Harare to Vic Falls. And
Yes,
you've got
100%.
these things shutting down, right? And I often think about the impact on the family, because this is how the family is surviving.
Mm-hmm.
There's value. People are employed within the family. And outside of the money, family businesses, to people who don't work in one, don't realize that that business almost becomes like a child or a part. It's actually a member of the family. It's
Yes,
like a
it
de
is.
facto member.
It is.
And seeing a member dying, you know, I think there's a grieving process, and we all feel differently, right? When someone dies in the family, there's an auntie who didn't like that grandpa. She's like, oh, I don't care that he died. Then there's someone else who's very close
Yes.
to grandpa,
Yeah.
who is mourning, all right? And there was someone who was raised by grandpa. And so even when someone dies in a family, there's always a different view of the person. And when I see like business closure, and I think about the system, like the family and the business being linked together, it makes me wonder about adaptability,
Right.
right?
Uh-huh.
How do we as family businesses deal with change and like needing to be agile and changing to the pressures of the economy, and ensuring that we're protecting the business and the family at the same time?
The reality is that sometimes change can be very difficult, even for families to look at change. You've created something that you are now comfortable running. You're comfortable knowing how this child likes to eat, their sleeping habits, how they like to take walks in the afternoon, and so forth. And when you look at the dynamic that's happening right now in our economy, you touched on the retail chain. One of the big retail chains that closed recently was a family business, started it out of Mashingo. And they've been running for 60 years.
Yeah.
In retail.
Yeah.
That's all they know.
Yeah.
Right? So to adapt and change might not happen as quickly. That is why in real worlds you have people who come in to help businesses accept change and learn to change and see that change is not a threat to your business. A lot of family businesses also, it takes care of an extended part.
Yeah.
Black tax is a real thing.
Yeah.
Right? And it might not necessarily come directly from the business, but it could come to you through a salary. Then you're taking care of a cousin, you're paying for fees and X and whatnot. So when the business starts to suffer, the extended family also starts to suffer because they also leverage on the success of that business for their own survival. So right now for family businesses, it's a really trying time because some of these external factors you cannot control.
Yeah.
But it's important for family businesses to learn how to, and we have those conversations even in our own businesses. In our own businesses, we talk about innovation a bit more,
Yeah.
right? How do we innovate? How do we look at the future? Are we going to be in the same business?
Yeah.
One family business sold a whole hotel chain
Yeah.
to go to do blueberries.
Yeah.
They managed the transition of change.
Yeah.
Why? Because they realized as much as we are hoteliers for so many years,
Yeah.
the world is different.
Yeah.
There are people who run these things better, but we cannot continue holding on to something that we are not. Then they've moved into something completely different.
Yeah.
And now in that new space, what it also does is that it ignites new energy in the family.
Yeah.
It ignites,
New
this new interest. It ignites, and sometimes you might even be, looking at saying, how do we bring the family generations into this new thing? My old man has always wanted my son to be an engineer, right? He's not an engineer, I'm not an engineer. We are running an engineering firm, right? But he's always felt like,
Makes sense.
So he's always wanted my son to, and my son was like, no, I want to take these subjects for A-level because I want to look at data and AI. And it also gave us the idea of saying, he's looking at the future. It doesn't mean that the future is delinked from what we're doing now.
Yeah.
Maybe the future of the business might find itself needing that
Yeah.
AI specialist when engineering is now totally different. So I hope a lot of businesses survive.
Yeah.
Family businesses.
Yeah.
It's very tough right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the things, people always ask me why I'm passionate about family businesses. If you look at global statistics, right, in most economies across the world, family business is actually the backbone of those economies, right? You're looking at 60%, 70%, 50% of economies are family owned or family run businesses. And so they have economic value, and their continuity is actually important to economies.
Yes.
And so I actually feel like, even from a policy perspective, right, we actually need to start thinking, what are family businesses contributing? What is the legislation around family businesses? Do we have any? Is there any support that we're actually giving them? I love what's happening in the UAE. Massive changes around family businesses, a lot of institutionalizing it and putting it within the laws,
Yes,
right?
100%.
And even in their chamber of commerce, they now have a Dubai Family Chamber of Commerce.
I read
because
about that. Very
because they've
fascinating.
realized that, look, in the UAE, 90% of their value is owned by families. And so if we don't start having these succession planning conversations,
Yeah.
continuity conversations, governance conversations, right? They're like, look, there's trillions of dollars sitting here. And can we afford to allow people to fight over it? Can we afford to allow businesses to fail because the founder died?
Yeah.
And so people might think it's like an elitist, wealthy 1% kind of conversation, but I actually don't believe it is.
Yeah. It's not.
I actually believe that this family business conversation is an economic conversation.
I also used to think you were crazy when you started this whole family drive. I used to wonder, what were you saying? Like, you know why? Because we wake up and go to work and we're just minding our own business, doing what we're doing. And you come here, stringing along the need for this conversation to happen. And outside of what the UAE has been doing, I've been reading about family offices a lot, right? And it's you realize the importance of how they influence policy, because their sustainability is the sustainability of economies. It's growth, it's employment, it's something to touch on. Our business deliberately employs a majority, over 95%, within Highfield, Budiro, Glenview, the surrounding areas, because we are in Willowville. So we want to impact the families in the communities that we are in.
Yeah.
So we try as much as possible deliberately to find the best talents we can in those societies.
Yeah.
Right? In doing that, we see it as our version of a policy of empowering those communities, right? And it speaks to what you're saying, that do governments understand the amount of family businesses in this country that are sustaining economies?
Yeah.
Or do they just see them as a brand? It's just a business. They don't really pay attention of who's behind this business, who's driving this. What happens if this business dies tomorrow? Right? Because there's family infighting, there's no succession planning, and etc. And you raise a very, very good point. I think we still have a long way to go in terms of looking at it that way. I think it's an agenda that needs to be had from a policy point.
Yes.
Right? Without obviously making it look like, oh, you're taking advantage and giving advantage to family businesses. No, there's the need for sustainability in families.
And continuity. Yeah. That's so true. And just as we're wrapping up, what are the biggest rewards that you found working in the family business? we've talked about challenges, and I think that's one of the we're always actually skewed towards the challenges,
Not
right?
about rewards. We suffer the most. We are the ones who suffer the most.
What are the rewards that you found working in a family business?
Sometimes you create opportunity without certain limitations. If you work for someone that might not necessarily be a family, you are limited to what they feel that should be the way things are done. In family, you can have a conversation at the beginning of the year and say, this is what we need to do, this is how we need to grow. Another thing we didn't touch on, but I've seen as a reward, is the ability to align your own vision with the business vision.
Oh, yeah.
That's always going to be very important in any family business,
Yeah.
because my vision and the vision of the business needs to align in a way that it does not conflict.
Yeah.
And once you can have that alignment, the rewards are great. Your vision you can attain, the business is also growing and going through what it goes through. It's something that is important, and I see that as it's rewarding when things do go through and do happen.
Yeah. And now we were wrapping up, but you've just driven us down the rabbit hole again.
I'm sorry. I
Yes.
apologize.
No, we love it. It's something very relevant that I think a lot of next gens ruminate on and think about is my vision,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because your journey, your experience is different in that you actually got interested in the business. There are next gens that work in a business that they're generally not interested in.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
And they might they're working in a steel company and they want to be an artist.
That's true.
Which
100%.
is like completely two different worlds. And sometimes you find that the conversation between the different generations is that it's the conflict in interest. I actually want to do something completely different. And you're a tech company and I want to do sustainable farming, for example.
100%.
And it's trying to then find what is the middle ground between who I want to be as a person and the vision I have for myself, right? As an individual, because I'm growing, I'm an adult. I have my family, I have my own thoughts. And I understand that you built this, and it's merging the two, right? Which sometimes comes as part of the conflict between two generations.
Can I make it even more interesting for you? That's the easier side of it. Your father builds this beautiful thing, and he sees the potential that Esther brings to what he's building. And he's so excited in grooming you and trying to bring you in there. But guess what happens? Esther gets married. And her husband says, we are relocating.
No, Masimba's
How
come
do
with
you-
with the
how
podcast
do you-
host energy. He's hijacked the podcast.
So that is an actual reality.
Yeah, it is.
That I was having a conversation about this very week.
Yeah.
Where I've called someone and I'm like, what are you doing in another country? Why are you not here? And why are you telling me to talk to your father? And she was like, because my husband said we have to move.
Yeah.
Can you imagine what Gen 1 goes through knowing that? Because the beauty of Gen 1 now is that it's not because I have a son. It is because I have a child that can,
yeah.
and it can be a daughter.
Yeah.
But imagine being told that, Dad, I have to move because I've got a family, right? And he's been sitting there saying, this is the legacy that
my
I'm
hope,
building
yeah.
for. And I know you can carry the legacy. So it's the complexities of the vision of the family and having to manage that complexity. Because where does he start from going forward?
Yeah.
You've gone.
Yeah.
You have to go. And it's difficult for him to say, don't go.
Yeah.
This is your husband. He's literally going to go and find another wife if you don't.
Yeah.
So what we talk about and those realities, and I'm happy that we're having these conversations because I believe this podcast is going to touch on so many aspects that families realize but don't talk about,
Yeah.
don't realize but need to talk about,
Yeah.
and just need to accept that survival means opening up a communication.
Yeah, and what you've actually said is, so since you came with podcast host energy with your question,
I'll send an invoice.
and your short
I'll send
left,
an invoice. Don't worry.
I'm gonna come with guest energy and share a story.
Okay.
So
I like this.
interestingly enough, when I got married, my dad actually took my husband and I to lunch.
Yeah.
And then he's very traditional, and he says to my husband, did she tell you that she works for us? I was looking at him like, what do you think I told him? What do you think?
He said that.
Yeah, he says, did she tell you? And he was like, yeah, no, I know that, she's doing whatever. And he was like, okay, and now you're married, and I don't want to be in your space, and I don't want to be in your house, and I don't want to impose my views on you. I'm asking. So my dad actually asked my husband if I could continue working for the business.
Which is impressive, though.
Yeah, so he actually took him to lunch and he says, so, Trukukumbiro.
I need your buy-in.
Yeah,
Kukumbiro
mkadzi wako, can she continue to work for us? I don't want to make you uncomfortable. If you're not feeling it, tell us.
Yeah.
And he was just like, no, don't worry. She had told me that this is what she does and it's fine. So again, you're bringing in another dynamic because then it comes with that African cultural lens, right? A father feeling that I'm no longer part of his jurisdiction. I'm under someone else's household. So he can't impose on another man his values and views, right? So he's coming to ask him. So yeah, now we're going down the in-law, outlaw a rabbit hole. But yeah, it's such a great point.
And there are families, from the cultural speak, that if the Gen 1 passes on, you will have brothers, cousins coming to say, we had a say in this business.
Yes.
We are entitled to takachitanga na baba wako iwa uzie, right? And I think I know we're running out of time, but it's important to have the conversation about how do we protect the business, right, from the family.
Yep, love that.
Right, because you and dad are working well. You've got the same vision. You know what you're doing, but if dad isn't there anymore, and family members start coming to impose, and people start coming to say, we were part of this and we need this and whatnot. How do we protect the company from the family? And it's a very important topic.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I can't touch on it today because we are done.
Yeah.
But I think it resonates with families.
Yes, it does.
I think it does.
Yeah, it really does. And thank you so much, Masimba, for coming on to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Family Wealth with Esther. Like we said, this podcast is shaking up the family business world. We want to have real conversations. And we want to talk about the real intricacies, the challenges, the rewards, not just the negative, but the good side of working in a family business. And the value that family businesses are creating, and to see more continuity and success, not just in Zimbabwe, but across the continent. So thank you so much for listening in to all our viewers and those who are listening maybe on Spotify and those who are watching on YouTube. Thank you so much. And tune in next week. We're going to have another exciting guest who's coming with some really fresh perspectives. So watch out for us on all our social handles. We're on Instagram, we're on X, we're on YouTube, we're on Spotify. We'll be updating you. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, right? This topic is so relevant to so many people. And we'd really love to hear your insights, your comments. Please inbox us any questions or any topic you'd actually like to see on the podcast, or anything you'd love us to discuss. Please inbox us and tell us what you're thinking. Inbox us your questions. Yeah, and we're actually going to start doing some answering questions. So watch out for that on our Instagram handles, on our TikTok, on our YouTube. We've actually started getting a few questions. So please send us your questions. Feel free, even if you have a burning pressing question in your family business. Let's see if we can unpack it and get any wisdom from us. Until next week, see you. Keep it in the family and in the business.